Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. If you could come in and get your seats, that'd be great. My name is Phil Robertson. I'm a board member of the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. I'm also director of the Asia Human Rights and Labor Advocates. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here for this midday event, talking about what's going to happen in the world now that the United States seems to be retrenching and moving beyond its ocean borders and leaving the world on its own. Before we get into today's event, I just want to make a few quick announcements about upcoming events at the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand. One of the advantages of membership, of course, is that you get in free for all events, as well as having a discount on the food and beverages. So please do consider joining. On the 15th, we have an event for IDHOT 2025, moving forward with the power of communities, talking about the issue of transgender rights. This is going to be a group of leading NGOs working on LGBT rights in the Asia-Pacific region. We're also going to be joined by Vitit Muntabon, of course, who was previously the the international expert on LGBT rights, the first one appointed by the UN. That will be at the 15th at 9:30 in the morning, starting early. That's at the press conference. We have on the 15th in the evening a discussion about the progress on the charge of genocide against Israel. This is an event that has been organized by the Palestinian Solidarity Committee. It's a private event, but it's open to the public. There will be a number of people coming, including, I believe, the ambassador of South Africa, to talk about the progress of the case at The Hague. And finally, on the 16th, midday, we're going to have a discussion about policies and patterns, a release about a report of the state-abetted transnational crime in Cambodia, talking about the scam centers and how this poses a global security threat. So all those events, that's a midday event that starts at 12:30 on the 16th. Today we have an amazing panel here to talk about the issues of rethinking the global order in the age of American retrenchment. We are waiting for one additional panelist who's not yet come, but is on the way, I'm assured. And I'm going to introduce the panel as in the order that they're going to speak. And then we'll open it up. First of all, we're going to hear from Bin Naifer Naraji, who's the president of the Open Society Foundations. Next, we're going to hear from Shannon Teo, who's the Malaysia bureau chief of the Straits Times. Thank you for coming all the way up. We'll then hear, if she arrives in time, we'll then hear from Risa Hontaveros, who's a senator from the Philippines, who's flown in for the event, and I understand is on the way in from the airport. Then finally, next we'll hear from Dino Pati Jalal, who is the founder of the Foreign Policy Community of Indonesia and a former Indonesian ambassador to the United States. He's online, as you can see. And finally, we'll hear from Fuadi Pitsuwan, who's the president of the Surin Pitsuwan Foundation and a lecturer at Thammasat University. So let me turn the floor over to Binafer.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the last time I was here, actually, in this club was a discussion. I was in the audience, and it was at the height of Duterte's drug killings in Philippines, and it was quite a controversial and heated discussion. So I feel like this space was already gloomy last time I'd come, and it only gets gloomier, it seems. So I want to just kick us off by giving a little bit of a sort of framing, because what we are seeing right now and what we're witnessing is so unprecedented, and how do we actually make sense of it? So the unipolar moment of the United States being the Pax Americana, where it's an unrivaled power, that's gone. So we don't have that one single force in the world. We've already moved into a G20 world. And so we're no longer even in a G7 world. And with BRICS countries organizing, the cumulative GDP is higher than G7 and holds half the world's populations. So where are we going? And it's clear that we're certainly not going to be where we have been for the last half a century. Will it be a bipolar world? Will we move to a world of spheres of influence? Will we move into a totally transactional world of me first? But what is very clear is that the world as we know it is unraveling. And the very powerful states that presided over it are the ones who are dismantling it. And we are now in a situation where basically, only some lives are worthy of grief. Laws are only invoked when convenient. And the double standards and hypocrisy that we're seeing around international human rights standards are so bad that one has to really ask, are there still standards at all? So where does that leave us? I think that we really are not in a place where we are just going to try to recover the old world with top-down reforms. I think that is not going to take us to where we need to be. I think we really have to think about what a new world order will look like. And right now we don't have that. It has not yet emerged. But what we need to be doing is looking for the people with the creativity and the moral imagination to imagine this new world. And those people were there at the end of the Second World War, who put into place the United Nations, who put into place the idea of shared humanity, who put into place the Declaration of Human Rights. Those were people with huge imagination to think out of the box at that time, and we are in that moment. And the question is, where is that moral imagination, and what can we make sense of in this sort of chaotic, fragile, volatile world that we're seeing now?
Thank you. So next, let's turn. Shannon, go ahead. We're going to have. I should mention that we are going to have time for question and answer at the end. So there will be an ongoing dialogue here. So please go ahead.
All right. Hi. Thanks for the invitation. Very happy to be here. I was the president of the Foreign Correspondents Clubs in Malaysia as well. So greetings from Malaysia. On behalf of the new committee, I'm not in the committee anymore. I was instructed to be kind of like a Japanese prime minister. They're always envoys after they leave office. I think I just want to pick up on that point about people wanting to go back to how things were before, right? So how do we get back to the status quo? And a lot of the negotiations that are going now is about going back to the status quo. How can we flatten out the tariffs that have happened and say, can we get it down back to 0%? Because in effect, certain countries, like for example, Australia, are saying that, wait a minute, you don't run a trade deficit with us. We import more from the US than we export to you guys. Why are we hit with a reciprocal tariff and stuff like that, right? But I think there is the counter reaction, at least what I see in Malaysia, and I can only speak from that experience. The people on the ground are asking this question, and it's not an easy answer, but how can we live without America, right? Is it possible to go on with our daily lives and not use iPhones, for example, or not use American products, not have to rely on America? And I think that proposition is very difficult from maybe a defense and security proposition, right? We in this region, we rely on the US as a kind of a sheriff. But on the economic front, I think that conversation is very real in Malaysia. In Malaysia, we export a lot of semiconductors to the US. And the question for them is, if you take away the US supply chain from us, the entire industry collapses, right? The whole island of Penang will just disappear overnight. And to kind of address this question of, can we live without the US? Can we live without that market, that economy? A lot of it has to do with supply chains as well. Now, Malaysia is a kind of an intermediate economy. We buy from a lot of places, we manufacture something, and then we sell on a different product at the end of it. And so we value add into the middle of the chain. And so it's not a realistic thing to ask Malaysia, can you decouple from someone? a lot of economies in this region, obviously, but in Malaysia, very much so, that you can't decouple from anyone. You need everyone. You're buying from everyone, you're selling to everyone. And that kind of idea of how can we shift our supply chains is very complex. It's not like a Lego movie where you just kind of take away the bricks and then you just build something else somewhere else, you know, because you have to think about where your vendors are from and where your customers are going to be coming from. So what's kind of underpinning the kind of sentiment in Malaysia, I think, is that it is this problem of uncertainty, right? If you're asking what keeps people awake at night, it's the uncertainty. Because all the way up to now, and it's been 6 months or so since we kind of knew Trump was going to win, that's all we have, right? We have no certainty. We have him promising that he's going to do stuff. Some he's done, some he hasn't. Then the ones that he's done, he's kind of paused it again. And then this pause is going to end in 6 weeks. But then now he's got a new pause for China, will end in 90 days. And because China is such a big market for Malaysia as well. So the number of shocks that are going to come in to the system, especially if you're a business person in Malaysia, is going to be very difficult to kind of absorb all of that. And that's a problem as well for, obviously, the Anwar Ibrahim administration, which has sold itself a lot on its handling of the economy. And this will probably be its biggest challenge. And it's coming right in the middle of the term. So if this kind of external headwinds are going to continue for the next 2 years, then that's going to run straight into the next general election as well. So yeah, that's just it's kind of lay of what's happening in Malaysia with regards to the geopolitics.
Let me now turn to Senator Risa to say a few words. Share us your perspective from the Philippines. Thank you so much for flying all the way over here too. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Swatika. I'm very sorry to be late.
No
The
problem
flight
at all.
was 1 hour late. I actually have I prepared a message, if I may quickly read it.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank
Please
you.
go ahead.
So, dear colleagues and friends, all who are here in support of our Southeast Asian community, I'd like to thank the Foreign Correspondents Club of Thailand for inviting me to join our friends here, sharing thoughts on issues affecting each one's country and our region. To say that this is a critical moment in world history is an understatement. While the world has always been in flux, the political and socio-economic tremors brought about by geopolitical shifts are threatening to set back decades of hard work and hard-won democratic freedoms. But in the escalating rivalry between the economic powers, particularly the US and China, the Southeast Asian region, we should find ourselves at a moment of opportunity. For the Philippines, while US retrenchment is somehow seen as heightening our insecurity in protecting the West Philippine Sea from China's frequent incursions and growing aggression, the Philippines, it provides an opportunity for us as well. In pursuing international collaboration and cooperation, the Philippines does always look at our nearest neighbors first, such as the ASEAN. Apart from our existing regional mechanisms and initiatives, we can and should establish our own security framework that is rooted in the principles of mutual respect, accountability, and the active non-violent resolution of disputes. The irony of the US looking inward is that it has nonetheless been afflicted by a disease sweeping the world. Populist authoritarianism has undermined government and social institutions by weakening the rule of law and discrediting dissent. A good example is what journalist and Nobel Prize winner Maria Ressa has called the Philippinization of American politics. The US, particularly under the second Trump administration and its rising authoritarian tendencies and the erosion of democratic principles, is mimicking the Philippine experience under the previous administration of Rodrigo Duterte. The law and social media are being weaponized not only to stifle but to create a chilling effect in efforts to intimidate legitimate opposition. Demonizing a segment of society is again being used as a rallying point to generate support, and at the same time is used to discriminate and exclude. and in many cases in the Philippines, to kill. For ex-President Duterte, it was drug users. For President Trump, immigrants. Just yesterday, my country held its midterm election, so this ink on the index finger, a sign that you have voted. So an elections which saw Filipinos voting for national and local positions. And I'm happy to share elections in which the opposition was able to post some significant victories, which we fully intend to use as muscle and our political weapons in the general elections in 2028. So I now have 12 new fellow senators, including 2 from the opposition, and some of the others of whom are allies of the former President Duterte, who, as you probably know, was China's good friend. His words, not mine. Duterte's relationship with China is long and deep, one that started even when he was a mayor in Davao City, a city in the southern part of the Philippines. In journalist Marites Vitug and Camille Elamia's book, Unrequited Love, they detail the depth and breadth of Duterte's love affair with China, showing leaders how closely intertwined the former president was with the politics and policies of Beijing. The moment he became president, it quickly became clear where his loyalties lay. On July 12, 2016, just a few months after he won the presidential elections, our country received news of the landmark Hague ruling, affirming that China's 9-dash line has no basis in international law. Instead of a national celebration to precisely celebrate that momentous arbitral award, the Duterte administration kept mum. That set the tone of how Duterte dealt with China's bullying the entire 6 years of his presidency, either by keeping silent or coming to Beijing's defense. How the Philippines responds to what happens in the West Philippine Sea, the whole South China Sea, the larger ASEAN region, and the wider international community is certainly anchored on the president, the chief architect of our foreign policy. Currently, the president, Marcos, has completely gone the opposite of Duterte's foreign policy. Perhaps another sore wound in the festering Marcos-Duterte feud. Friend to all, enemy to none, has been the rallying cry of his administration. His administration has had strong remarks against China's actions in our waters, has declared that the Philippines will yield not 1 square inch of our territory, and has established defense and security agreements with like-minded nations. I lay this down as geopolitical tensions in the West Philippine Sea because they factor into our local elections. Surveys in the country show that the majority of the Filipino people will not vote for pro-China candidates. However, despite this, the electoral history of the Philippines has largely been characterized and influenced by the dominance of political dynasties. And what politicians stand for, more often than not, automatically converts into votes. This election saw, the one yesterday, an unprecedented number of dynastic candidates at all levels of governance. In an alarming mixture of deeply entrenched dynasties and freshly flourishing ones, they dominate by limiting electoral competition and undermining meritocracy. With their control over government resources, they thrive by promoting corruption and clientelistic relationships and weakening institutional checks. On the other hand, it was certainly an uphill battle for many progressive candidates. But as I mentioned, at the national and also at the local level, we are still collating the results. There were many victories as well. And we continue to be hopeful and undaunted in the face of the huge challenge ahead of us as we work towards a stronger democratic future. Democracy is in the crosshairs of destructive political forces. We have elections that reflect not necessarily the full, genuine will of the people, but instead the deep demand to satisfy the immediate needs of an impoverished citizenry. We have an electorate whose choices are also guided by systematic disinformation. Civic space is shrinking as social and political institutions are weakening. With the diminishing dominance of the US, and if we are to navigate these political quagmires, the Southeast Asian community must strengthen our platform for solidarity and democratic cooperation. This we do by sharing the best models of governance each of us is practicing. This we do by drawing in progressive political parties, exemplary local governments, modernizing sections of the private sectors, and vibrant people's movements and civil society. This we do by continuing to strengthen relationships beyond the US and China, because whether about international security or democratic governance, a broader coalition is a better coalition. Again, thanks so much, Khop Ka, for having me, and I look forward to an insightful discussion.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn to Ambassador Dino, who's online here. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. By the way, I'm ambassador retired. Yeah, I'm no longer ambassador, so my views
Former
are
ambassador.
totally.
Yes.
And hello, Sawadee Krap to you and to all the panelists, and special hello to my good friend Binarji, who I just saw in Bangkok a few days ago, and now I'm in Jakarta. Look, regarding the theme, retrenchment, U.S. retrenchment, I think there are a couple things that Trump 2 are different than Trump 1.0 in terms of foreign policy. It's not just retreat. Yes, there's retreat from climate commitment, retreat from WHO, USAID is being pulled back, and more global commitments that the United States will be retreating from. But it's also combined with scolding of allies and friends, and it's also combined with the serious undermining of the world order. I mean, I would never think of a Western country that is claiming the sovereign territory of her ally, in this case Greenland, and with regard to Denmark. You know, this was unprecedented and unthinkable in the present liberal international order. So that's what is happening in Indonesia. We also retreated. You know, this was when we underwent democratic transition in 1998, 1999. We just became very inward-looking and didn't pay much attention to the region as well. But we did not scold Malaysia or the Philippines or Singapore. And we did not undermine the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, and we did not undermine the world order, our commitments to the UN Charter, right? And this is why in the U.S. it's not just retreating, but again, it's scolding its allies and partners and doing things that undermine the world order. And why is this significant? 4 years of U.S. foreign policy is gonna be a lot. Yeah, if it's if it's Laos undertaking disruptive foreign policy, it will have not such a large impact. If it's Indonesia undertaking a disruptive foreign policy, again, as the previous episodes had shown, it did not impact the region much. But given the scale of U.S. power, the dimensions, the military, political, economic, diplomatic dimensions, 4 years of disruptive U.S. power will have reverberations globally that will be felt by every region of the world, right? But clearly, I think for countries in the region and countries around the world, when they plan their foreign policy, they now have to factor in the fact that the U.S. is no longer interested in global leadership anymore, as opposed to in the past, where the U.S. Kept asking, okay, we gotta return the mantle of leadership and respected by the international community and so on. But I hardly can find any one issue where the U.S. can say, hey, with Trump administration can say, look, we want to take the lead on that. Yeah, If there is one, I would like to know what that is, right? But there's a recent development that is interesting. That is U.S. taking the lead, at least on two issues, but taking the lead alone, right? What I'm talking about is Ukraine. U.S. is taking the lead now. There have been some meetings in Saudis, and then plan one for Istanbul, and so on. And the U.S. is saying to Europe, look, I'll handle this, and you follow my lead, whether or not you like it, right? But they're doing this sort of alone, yeah. And on India, Pakistan, at first, DC says, look, it's a matter for India and Pakistan, but somehow they got involved and they took the lead in the ceasefires and so on. But as far as I know, without consulting India, for example. So there's this tendency. If I took the lead on some issues, I would do it, but I do it alone without consulting my allies and friends, right? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the next 4 years. Yeah. Now, the significance also, we mentioned about multipolar world, and I think what is strategically significant is that in a multipolar world, the strongest pole is now broken, right? Because if you look at the poles, there's the Russia pole, the China pole, and definitely the U.S. and allies pole. The U.S. allies pole is the strongest one, right? It's always been like that. You have the G7, very economically structured. You have NATO, very militarily structured, and the bilateral alliances with Japan, with the Philippines, with Korea, and others, right? But that pole is broken if you see the role between the U.S. and Europe at the moment, right? And again, this is going to affect the world system, because in the world system, the most consequential grouping of nations is really the Western nations. When they decide they want to do something and promote an issue globally, that usually create waves that are significant. Unlike the global South, for example, it's just too many, too wide, and they don't really decide on one issue that they want to push. So that pole, the Western pole, somewhat is broken in a multipolar world, and the consequences will be quite far-reaching. I take difference with a friend from the Straits Times who said that look, the U.S. we always relied on the U.S. the sheriff in our region and so on. Because the strategic culture in Southeast Asia is rather different, in my view. I was in Munich Security Conference, and the Europeans freaked out with the Trump policies, because the strategic culture is based on American protection, right? That is just for decades the strategic culture in Europe. But in Southeast Asia, the strategic culture is very different. There is no single protector, and there's no protector at all for the region. Yeah, there's no external protector, the United States, nor China, nor anyone that we see as protector of the region. And internally, no country in the region positions or promotes itself as a protector. And certainly not Indonesia, the biggest country by far in terms of population and size, and also the economy, right? So in Southeast Asia, in fact, we have been successful in instilling an anti-hegemonic regional system. If you ask me what ASEAN is an anti-hegemonic regional system where no one from the outside dominates. Events in regional affairs are driven by local countries, and local countries, the regional countries, no one dominates among them. So I felt that it's important to register that point. And I think in this time where we facing a world in transition, I really believe that the world is not just uncertainty or moving here and there temporarily. I think we're seeing an important seismic, systemic transition from the world, Western liberal international order, to something else, which is still elusive. Yeah, but that something else is definitely taking shape. Now, in such a volatile and transitioning world order, every Southeast Asian country, in my view, should take an ASEAN first foreign policy. Yeah, Trump has this America first foreign policy, which is fine, but for us, we need to have not an inward-looking meism, but an ASEAN first foreign policy. And I think also in terms of the world order, with so many countries being, adopting populism or meism or narrow nationalism or ultra nationalism. And this is where me and Binerji, I think, are on the same page. The role of civil societies have become very important, right? As the quality of politics, this system of international relations shifts in different directions, civil society is the one that will hopefully keep things sane, stabilize things, maintain pressures on good governance, keep up with freedoms among the peoples, and that irrespective of who is in power, how good or bad are those in power, civil society will keep the standards high at a time when standards and norms and rules are being disrupted in many places. And I do hope that civil societies within ASEAN will come together and get to know one another, because honestly, in a people-centered ASEAN that has become the strategic doctrine of ASEAN in the last 10 years or so, people-centered ASEAN remains very shallow. ASEAN people still do not know one another. They do not connect with one another. They do not understand one another. The term ASEAN identity, the majority of ASEAN peoples don't embrace that ASEAN identity as yet. So this is the time, in my view, of civil societies around the world and for ASEAN peoples, a people-centered ASEAN to really discover its true meaning on the ground.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to turn over to Fuadi. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Before I start, I would like to pay tribute to two persons who have a lot of impact on me. First is Gwen Robinson of the FCCT, former president of FCCT. Gwen always had wanted me to speak on the panel, but I always end up being an organizer or rather moderate like Phil, right? But too bad Gwen is not here to see this, that I finally step up on the stage. Second is my supervisor, Joseph Nye, who just passed away. I think it's quite appropriate that the liberal world order ends as he passed. So I put up this picture. I don't know if anyone would recognize this, to give you a snapshot, a foreshadow of what I think could happen. There'll be a series of pictures. This is a picture of Admiral Zheng He, one of the greatest admiral in the world. In the 15th century, he led what is termed the treasure fleet of 200 ships around the world. There are even some theory that he discovered America before Christopher Columbus, but that is to be disputed. But anyway, one of the greatest explorer. But since he returned to China, and the Ming Dynasty became very afraid of trade, very afraid of globalization, became very inward-looking, insular, and burned down all of his ships. And that triggered the decline of Chinese naval power, the Chinese power for the next 200 years. And it is possible that what we are seeing, what we are witnessing with the US, with whatever Trump is doing, is foreshadowed by this event that happened in the 15th century. This is another picture that every IR student would relate to. This is the picture of the Peloponnesian War 2,400 years ago. This is a war between Spartans and Athens. And you can tell the Athens by their shield, because they are democratic countries, democratic state. They value different pictures, right? Different identity. The Spartans are very strong, look all the same. The Spartans were the dominant power, right? And as Athens were rising, Spartan felt threatened and had to launch a preemptive war to suppress the Athens. And this is another potential scenario that we may be seeing with whatever Trump is doing. This is a picture that most of you should recognize. This is the bombing of the Pearl Harbor. The Japanese launched a preemptive war because they would not be able to import oil, food, and trade, right? And the oil embargo against the Japanese pushed them to preemptively strike in order to keep them so the supply flowing. This is another scenario that we may be potentially seeing with the US pressuring China with trade war. It could spill over into hot war anytime. This is the last article that my professor wrote. He passed away on May 6th. On May 1st, he wrote this article. And this is one of the biggest fear that I think any student of international relations is fearful of. The greatest human achievement for the past 70 years is that there has been no nuclear war. But with the ending of the liberal world order, countries like Japan, Korea, Germany, Thailand even, Myanmar is getting nuclear energy power plant from Russia. Vietnam is getting a nuclear power plant from Russia. Many countries are talking about acquiring their own nuclear weapons. We could potentially see a proliferation of nuclear weapons, which, could trigger accident, could create misunderstanding, could create security dilemma that could lead into a level of destabilization that we have not seen since the end of World War II. Oh, the font really changed. So it sounds like cable from from WikiLeaks. Let's backtrack that a little bit. I hope to zoom you out to look at the big picture of what really happened. Trump got one thing right, and I think I hope we recognize that. The emergence of Trump came because of the failure of globalization. It was a direct symptom of hyper-globalization, and some scholars have talked about this. Danny Lodrick, Joseph Stiglitz. His diagnosis, is correct, right? U.S. manufacturing decline, living standard of working class is largely correct. The problem is his antidote, his prescription, trade war, nativism is misguided and counterproductive. And if any of us has visited the US in the past 3-4 years, I think we all can feel that it's not the same country anymore, with shop closure, with homelessness. I think anyone can see that. They have distribution of wealth problem. This is seen on the street of America. And as this was happening, right, as America were feeling this, as Americans were feeling this, the rest of the world was rising. China, in particular, was benefiting from this, was rising. Couple that with the belief of the MAGA movement. They believe America has stretched itself too thin. Trump believed in altruism in a way that I give, it's a zero-sum game. I gave, you win, I lose. And there's this concept called relative gain. Even if both of us gain, if you gain more, I feel like I don't like that. Right? Even though both of us gain, but if you gain more, it's in relative term, I felt I gained less than you. And he is willing to be spiteful. He was willing to get into the situation where it's a lose-lose situation as long as the other side lose. And that is what we are seeing now. Marry this with Trump's, the fact that this is Trump's second term, he has nothing else to lose. disregard for democracy and human rights, does not understand that if other countries are also democratic, you tend to fight less. Disregard for separation of power, judiciary, authority. See alliance as altruistic, right? American give, America lose, Japan, Korea, Philippines, Australia gain. So what we are seeing is what I would term the American authoritarian moment. So what is the hope? Where are the hopes? The hopes are with the American people, right? The Washington elite, the Wall Street are fighting back, showing him that this is not correct. People on the street, people are going to the street to fight back. More systematically, internationally, a few concepts are still holding out hope, like complex interdependent, which suggests that countries are more interdependent than the Cold War. The US and America trade more. Another concept, multiplex world order by Amitav Ashara, that we, MNC, people-to-people relation, technology transfer do keep us together in one world. We are much more related than we think we are. So how far can this decoupling really take place? I hope that we soon, and I think we are seeing some sign that we realize we are much more interconnected than we think we are. So what will remain of the international liberal order, right? I think this is quite important. Coming from a smaller middle power country like Thailand, I think there has to be a clear distinction in how we plan out the strategy for a country. First, whether do we think that the post-Trump era will be an aberration? If we believe it's an aberration, middle power like Thailand may be able to afford to hold out, right? There will be some remnants of liberal world order where will come back. US will be back to underwrite some of it, if it's not all, so we can hold out. But if we believe this is a systematic decline, and eventually will be an absolute decline to the US, China will rise to power, this would force the small and medium power to rethink and take side. Some will choose to bandwagon with China, but then China is not benign either. It is not a responsible stakeholder, so there will be a trust deficit. So I don't think we will see China replacing the US as a new hegemon, as a new leader of the world order anytime soon, because China see itself as benefiting from this order as well. So it is very difficult for the rest of the world, particularly small and medium power, of how we would maneuver this. Potential endgame, the few scenarios that people are talking about, hot war, right? Trump is trying to peel China off of Russia and put all energy into containing China, which could really lead to hot war. There have been talks about different sphere of influence, China, Russia, US, dividing up different powers. Hopefully there will be a democratic nation sphere of influence as well. And there are already wars elsewhere. We're seeing India and Pakistan fighting. Potential of nuclear, new level, new era of nuclear proliferation, which I have already talked about. For the rest of the world, I think regionalism, like Pat Dino have talked about, mini-lateralism will become ever so important. For the liberal, how far can Europe, Japan, Korea, liberal countries, Australia, New Zealand, maybe India, step up to fill this void? So what about Thailand? What is it? What's is next for us as a medium, small power, depending how you see it? I map out the voting correlation in the UN between US and Thailand. And surprisingly to me, we were only correlated to the US only during the Cold War. Since then, if you notice, we have Thailand has declined, right? This is a Pearson correlation, so below zero means no correlation, right? So we were really well coordinated with US in the 50s, right? And then we have moved away from the US since. And then I overlay this chart with China. China is orange. We have moved much closer to be much more correlated with China in the UN voting system. Since China became part of the UN in 1971. So since then, we have allied much closer in terms of voting in the UN. to China. So this is what we are seeing. This is the latest survey. If countries in Southeast Asia can pick one, which one they will choose? The top 3 biggest countries in Southeast Asia all pick China. This is the state of the world, state of the region that we are in, except the Philippines, right? Only 14% will pick China, but the rest of us will pick China. This is the survey I did with my student, 117 students, last Wednesday. I asked them, there's a translation, I asked them, do you guys think a hot war between the US and China will occur in 5 years? 44% said it could happen if there is a trigger like conflict over Taiwan, South China Sea. 30% say unlikely, high possibility 18, right? And then for sure 1%. If you add up for sure, high possibility, and it could happen, that amounts to 63%. So young Thai, this is under 20s, IR, international relations student that think that we will go to war, China and US will go to war within 5 years. So this is the state that we are in. So for Thailand, there's a big debate now in Thailand, whether Thailand is a small state or a middle power, right? The establishment, the foreign ministry, for the longest time, the leadership of this country see ourselves as a small state. Tet Bunnak is a former foreign minister, current secretary general of the Red Cross. Being a small state, right, that he see ourselves as a small state. Small state means you don't have agency to control your own fate. You are subjected to the mercy of the great powers. This is the establishment. But we young people in Thailand, the under 40 have been pushing for this idea, this narrative. This is the leader of the People's Party, try to put forward this idea of Thailand as a middle power. This was just 2-3 weeks ago. Just try, because middle power means you have agency, you can control your own fate, you can dictate. Instead of bending with the wind, you can build a windmill to harness the energy from the wind that is blowing very, very strong. And just last week as well, this is the first time that I see, after our continual push for this narrative, Thailand as a middle power since at least 2023. 2 weeks ago, I saw the spokesperson of the foreign ministry start saying that he sees Thailand as a middle power. So there is some sign of positive movement in that direction. First, Thailand has to become middle power. Second, we have to really stick to the idea that foreign policy for Thailand can be ethical, right? We need to be more enlightened in our national interests, take care of our friends in Myanmar, not because altruism, but because taking good care of other people benefit ourselves. Thailand is an aging society. Giving vaccine to Myanmar refugee will help protect Thai people. Be enlightened about it. Be ethical about our foreign policy, and it will help us. Lastly, I think this idea should become mainstream, and it was proven that it could become mainstream because of the last election that People's Party that moved forward won, right? This idea that there is something wrong with the world liberal order, but the antidote is not anti-trade, but about coming back to what does free trade mean for the labor, what does free trade mean for the environment, what does free trade mean for the rest of the 99%, not just the top 1%. So this idea like progressive capitalism of Joseph Stiglitz, whatever Danny Broderick have been speaking, Ha Jun Chang speaking about industrial policy, strategic tariff, I think this will have to be mainstream, not just for Thailand, but for the rest of the world as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot to unpack there. We're going to take some questions. There is a microphone in the back for people who want to ask questions. Please identify yourself. Also identify any organization that you're representing. Indicate who you're directing the question to. But before I open the floor, I want to ask a question myself, which is, you mentioned very clearly the issue of we need moral imagination now going forward. How do we have moral imagination coming forward if, in fact, we have, civil society increasingly flat on its back because it doesn't have funds or doesn't have independent sources of income? How do we, the UN is not going to step up because they're cutting back. The U.S. has disappeared. Where's the wellsprings of this moral imagination going to come from, and how should we foster that or sort of encourage that?
So I don't think it's an issue of funding, although obviously money is important. But I think and listening to the presentations, what we are doing is we're putting lenses or filters on things with the reality of what we've known. So we're putting a Cold War filter on to see where's the next Cold War, or nuclear proliferation, or we're taking what we've known in the past and trying to apply it to the change. The world has now moved on. I mean, I think that first of all, the neoliberal economic order is actually, it's now completely broken. We've got 3.3 billion people living under governments where the debt servicing payment exceeds the payments for health and education. They have no hope to develop. They have no hope to do anything. The nature of the idea of go for the cheapest, free trade, free money, free labor, and what it's done is it's created, it hasn't unleashed prosperity, it's unleashed inequality in spades in ways that we've never seen before. So now when you look, where is that energy? Where is the new energy coming from? I actually see it in young people, and they don't need money. What you see are groups of younger people beginning to organize in different ways than the ways we've done in the past. They're working in the virtual space. They're organizing without leadership as we know it. They are asking for a world that's not just, what they see is the world that they're going to inherit is broken and maybe even has an existential crisis. And what they're asking for is framed in terms of human rights and justice and equity. And these are kids growing up who've not seen that in their lifetime, but somehow they can envision. So I was recently in Bangladesh. Students there organized and brought down a government. In Sudan, brought down a government. In Senegal, brought down a government that was aiming to stay a third term. What we are seeing now is that kind of organizing and the power and ability, without money, of younger people to bring change. The question now is, how do you harness that energy? It's a dangerous energy if it's not captured and harnessed well. And we saw that in Sudan, where the fleeing of a government turned into basically a conflict, a volatile conflict when the vacuum came. So what I think the issue is there are people out there, the imagination is there, they need support, they need upskilling, but they're going to take us out of it. And I think that with good cause, they're pretty angry at the world they're inheriting.
Will others on the panel like to comment as well?
What's the question? More?
No, we're talking about the moral imagination, where the wellsprings of the moral imagination that was originally talked about is sort of something we need to be looking for.
I think for us specifically in Thailand, every time we speak about human rights, democracy, there is a lot of backlash. Let me give you an example. My colleague, who is an MP for the Move Forward Party, she's a woman, spoke in Parliament about we need to help Myanmar people because of human rights and democracy. Big backlash, right? There was a hashtag. If you're Thai, you would remember hashtag Myanmar's People's Party, right? Not Thai People's Party against her. And then some of other MPs and other scholars, myself included, had to come out and justify why human rights and democracy can benefit you in material terms, can be part of Thailand national interests as well. And I do feel that resonates with a lot of the conservative, the people who are quite the first narrative that I talk about. So we have been trying to justify, for example, like I talked about before, why Thailand needs to care about ethics in foreign policy, why Thailand needs to care about human rights, democracy. Because at the end of the day, this is an enlightened, this is Alexander the Tocquevillian kind of idea, right? Enlightened self-interest. You help others so that in the end, in the long run, this will benefit you. Cross-border vaccines, giving vaccine to potential refugees on the other side of Myanmar, because when they cross over, Thai people will be protected. We treat the immigrant workers here nicely because they are part of our society. They help build the Thai economy. We are aging society. This new wave of Myanmar refugees coming into Thailand are doctors, lawyers, businessmen, which is very different, right? We need to find a way to let them contribute to the economy here so it helps Thai people. So my point here is moral imagination, I think, come from trying to reframe this kind of messaging that people who believe in human rights and democracy have done in the past, but did not quite resonate with the conservative, with people who think otherwise, and try to reframe it in the material, in the economic, in the national interest term. I think for Thailand, I think the next phase will be some of that, I think.
May I offer some opinion on this,
Please,
moderator?
go ahead.
In 50 years, Indonesia had 2 presidents, 1945 to about 1997. And then from 1998 to 2002, in 4 years, we had 4 presidents, right? And the country was just got turned upside down. Political instability, our economy contracted by 13%. Governance, corruption just rose, conflict rose, and so on. But we survived that. Why? Civil society. They stayed together. They kept the leadership alive of things, of political thinking, and they guarded democracy and reforms. Right. With that, the civil society. Indonesia's democracy would have crumbled, because I said in 4 years you had 4 presidents in condition of extreme political and economic instability. So that's one point. The other point is, again, we got to be a bit sober about this. I said, yes, civil society is great and very strategic and very much needed, but keep in mind there's good civil society, there's bad civil society. When we talk about authoritarianism in Indonesian political system, we can talk about state authoritarianism or mass authoritarianism. Those group of ultra-nationalists, hardcore groups in society who impose their views on others, who intimidate others, who bribe government officials, and so on and so on. So keep in mind there's good and bad civil societies, and things go well when the good civil societies take command. They unite, they work together, they believe in some things, and they keep the direction of the country going in the right direction.
Thank you. Question.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. Sorry, I introduced myself. Tom Vasey. I'm a BCCT member, and I work with a business that has a focus on Vietnam. So all of this is very relevant to me. My first question is about the US dollar, which hasn't so far been mentioned by any of the panelists. And of course, as one economist, I'm not an economist, by the way, describes it, it's the exorbitant privilege of the United States to have the world's reserve currency, and in large part is a cause of a lot of the trade imbalances. So do the panel see a way that, for example, the countries in ASEAN or elsewhere can wean themselves off the dollar? I think the BRICS countries, for example, have been talking about the idea of alternatives, but it seems to me that without some alternative to the US dollar, I think the rest of the world is going to have to continue to dance to the tune of the United States. That's my first question. The second question I directed really at the ambassador. Thank you for your words, a lot of which I agree with. Regarding ASEAN, I think ASEAN has been given an opportunity in some ways with the situation in Myanmar to kind of step up to the plate and try and mediate that, and has not really been very successful there. Do you really think that ASEAN has a future as a kind of powerful regional bloc that can actually have more of an impact on things like the situation in Myanmar? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who'd like to answer first? Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. Sure, sure.
So on the US dollar, I mean, I think we have to remember every empire has its day. When the British pound was the international currency for a while, and then it wasn't. And so that could be the fate of the US dollar. At the start of the Ukraine war, India and Russia began doing payments in their own currencies, which was a first, and they moved away from the US dollar. BRICS countries are talking about trade in their own currencies. And I think what was interesting, and the reason why Trump backed off on the tariffs, was that there was a downsell of bonds, US bonds, which is actually what holds the US economy, is that others invest in their bonds. It was the bond sales that got Trump to back off. And I think what you're also seeing is people are not going to stick around and wait for this to happen. And you see that in the price of gold. Gold is now the universal currency that people are shifting to. So I think it'll take time, but I think we're already moving there.
Well, if I may,
Please.
Mr. Moderator, maybe I'll take a shot at the first question too.
Please go ahead.
There's a trend now where the Americans are saying, look, if any of your components are coming from China, that's a no good. There's no go, right? And we've seen more and more of that. And the countries are listening. Okay, so if our products and some components are made in China, then we don't get access, or we get tariff to the U.S. market. I think and there's nothing that we can do to stop the Trump administration from thinking this. They got sovereignty, right? So, and we want to sell, we got to play by that rule. But what will be happening is that we're going to have two supply chains, right? We're going to have two systems of supply chains inevitably. One is the one that will abide by that, right? Countries that want to sell to American market is huge. Then they may do away with the China content in order to win favorable terms to export. But there are others who say, we can ignore that market. We can go to the other markets and still keep the China content in our products, right? So we are going to see, I think, inevitably, these two supply chain models that will take place in the world economy. And on the de-dollarization, it's not going to happen soon. And BRICS policy is not to just to replace the dollar. That's not their official policy. But the trend of using other currencies will definitely grow, as Binarji says. Indonesian trade with China increasingly use yuan. And I think the number will go up significantly in the coming years, along with the rapid expansion of Indonesia-China trade. Now, the second question, look, first, do not judge, I would say do not judge ASEAN success in terms of Myanmar, because, look, it's a hard nut to crack, and no solution can be imposed on Myanmar. No solution can be imposed on Myanmar. What ASEAN can do is, look, we are invested in your peace and stability, and we hope there will be inclusive dialogue leading to a durable political solution among the parties. And what we don't want to happen is to have a conflict that spirals out of control. It affects the neighboring countries such as Thailand and others, right? So far, the political temperature has been good. There's a ceasefire since the earthquake. That ceasefire has been extended, and Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, has announced that he will talk not just with the junta but with the opposition groups in Bangkok, and I think is a good sign that at that level there is a strong political attention to try to resolve, help find a resolution to the Myanmar conflict. Although I don't see this being resolved anytime soon, and I don't think the elections that is being planned will help, because it's not an inclusive election, and we don't know if it's going to be a fair election. But let me just say on ASEAN that our ambition is not to be a regional power. We're not Europe, where there's NATO, and the Europeans now are trying to build, over 2% defense budget of NATO, and they want to build their own defense capability and so on. Keep in mind a very special thing about ASEAN now. There is no arms race in Southeast Asia. There's one in Northeast Asia. There's one in South Asia. There's one in the Middle East. There's one in Europe, right? In Southeast Asia, there's no arms race. You know how special that is. It's a very good indication of a unique brand of our regionalism. And keep in mind that what we're after is not regional power, as you said, is more regional resilience, more ASEAN centrality in the management of the wider regional affairs, and it's more ASEAN cohesion, how ASEAN countries can coordinate better and unite better in making decisions that affect the region. And there's one important point. I know there's what's going to happen with the U.S. Having different policies and so on and so on. But look, a lot of events in our region were done without the United States, right? ASEAN from 5 to 6 to 10 became whole of ASEAN 10 without the United States. The ASEAN-China Code of Conduct negotiations is being done without the United States. The Thai-Malaysia joint development that is very successful to address their overlapping claims has been done without the United States. The East Asia Summit was done without the United States. It was ASEAN 10 plus 3 again, and then US and Russia joined later on, right? The TPP, the Americans left, but then CPTPP proceeded and it went just fine. RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, were created without the United States, and it's all good. Right, the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation, we asked the United States to sign on to it. For many years they refused, but in the end they ended up signing on to it as more and more countries joined the Treaty of Amity and Cooperation. I can go on, but the point is ASEAN resilience, ASEAN progress is great if we get the United States to come in and support us, but if they don't want to come in, we say we move on no matter what, because we got our own business. And you can join us when you're ready to do so. And there are plenty of conflicts or issues that we can resolve among ourselves with ASEAN taking the lead. I think that's what's unique about Southeast Asian regionalism. And keep in mind, in Southeast Asia, unlike in South Asia where there's two regional organizations, there's SAARC and there's BIMSTEC. In the Middle East, there is Arab League and there's the GCC. In Southeast Asia, there's only one organization, which is ASEAN. And again, that is very unique to our region.
Please, go ahead, Juan.
Some of you here may know that I moonlight as a coffee trader. And there's one very interesting anecdote. The Japanese has been buying my coffee in Thai baht for the past 2 years already. And this year, the European asked to be quoted in euros, normally in US. So I think there's something there. I can only tell you that if you're in the US, go to Trader Joe's, buy Thai coffee, support Thai coffee. But this is the point. I sense some change in how the buyers are trying to buy using other currency. This is from personal experience. On ASEAN, Pak Dino could become next ASEAN Secgen. So he has been saying good things about ASEAN. If any person in this room will be pro-ASEAN, it should be me, because my late father was ASEAN Secgen. But as a younger person under 40s, admittedly, I have a lot of doubts in the future of ASEAN, because I felt that it has increasingly become irrelevant to the life, to the hope and dreams of young people in a lot of places in the world, right? It hurts me a lot when I see ASEAN flag being burned by the Burmese Myanmar protester. Having said that, I think it needs strong leadership. Maybe one day Pak Dino could lead ASEAN Secretariat to instill some hopes and dream back into young people. But having said that, I do not see other hopes either. With the multilateralism dying, with the world liberal order coming to an end, I think we have to come back to regionalism. We have to make ASEAN strong. I don't think we have choice. As much as I felt like I have less hope and I'm doubtful, but I think we have to come back to it. In terms of ASEAN trade, right? When my father was ASEAN Secgen, I think intra-ASEAN trade was 25%, and he has been saying all this time that we need to trade more with each other. I don't think it has really increased, and it's probably decreased as well, right? Because China import more into Thailand, into ASEAN, and then we export to the US as a rerouting. So intra-ASEAN trade has not increased. I think we have to come back to relook at how to make ASEAN stronger, how to make ASEAN more united. And this is a good opportunity to do that. I think without the US, I think we have to come back and talk to each other more and try to forge a type of regionalism that makes it work for young people as well.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just share a few quick thoughts on the three first questions so far. And taking off from one of the things that Faudi just said, the most recent question was about ASEAN's future as a powerful regional bloc, even vis-a-vis member countries like Myanmar. I'm not as of the generation as young as Faudi, but I am of that generation of activists here in Southeast Asia who wanted to believe more and be engaged more with ASEAN and have seen its value as an economic arrangement, but have been frustrated that it doesn't mean more and act more on the political questions. For example, on Myanmar, when Myanmar was still called Burma, there was already a Free Burma coalition, and now it's Myanmar, but still, I'm one of those still hoping that the ASEAN can translate the muscle of our economic cooperations into a more political actions in support of human rights and the democratization process in Myanmar. Even on the question of regional security and the geopolitical dynamics, minilaterals, which I think Faudi also mentioned earlier, could be a starting point. Sorry, that's for the economic, in the face of the US barrage of tariffs recently. The economic partnership so far within and among ASEAN countries, we can try to exercise. We can try to exercise those more in terms of multilaterals, even on the military and geopolitical questions, because there will be competition on the economic questions, but in terms of the security, for example, the responses to China, we can start with multilaterals, more bilateral among different ASEAN countries, and see how this can help prevent the outbreak of hot conflicts, not just in the West Philippine Sea, but in the whole of the South China Sea and in the broader ASEAN region. the question about decoupling from the U.S. dollar. Well, I was really interested in the narrative about trading in baht on coffee or in other currencies aside from the U.S. dollar. I'd also be interested to know what the different central banks in the ASEAN would have to say about this, and also civil society, alternative economic arrangements like cooperatives, including those that are into funding or financing micro, small, and medium enterprises in the region. Interesting question also for me because, of course, currency is a very powerful symbol also of dominant systems and transitions to possible alternative systems even in our region. And last but not the least for now, the question about the moral imagination and funding. Well, when I hear a question about the relationship of two factors that I don't immediately connect with each other, my first impulse is to think of it as an organizing question. So for example, when we speak about moral imagination or ethical imagination, we immediately think of the young people, which my sister here immediately talked about, and of course, communities of artists and cultural workers in our different societies, those who are reminding us about old norms that have been forced to go out of fashion, or especially among our younger people, new norms that are trying to bring alive in our society. So how do we mobilize resources for the acting out and the working out of concrete models, best practices of these aspects of moral imaginations at a time that funding is harder to come by even among the established NGO community? How can we mobilize small but numerous contributions from citizens, members of civil society, and people's organizations? How can we get in touch with those modernizing sections of the private sector that maybe want to go beyond mere corporate social responsibility and really work with these spaces where moral imagination is being exercised to bring them alive in concrete alternative political and economic arrangements? And of course, when progressive or even reformist parties and coalitions are in power, what kind of government policies can they implement in actual programs in their societies to support through annual budgets of the governments these thinking out and exercising of moral imagination?
Sorry, I think I know why the Thai baht is so strong now, because of all your coffee trade. But I did want to respond to what Padino said, and I actually agree with him. But I think Fuadi kind of outlined the response right there, that you can't judge ASEAN just based on the Myanmar conflict on the South China Sea and all these big questions. Trying to get a successful outcome on those questions is always going to be very difficult. But yeah, at the same time, people of ASEAN are looking for the answer, right? You're looking for the solution, and you're hoping for it to come from ASEAN. Whether it's a fair ask or not, it's not the point. Most people don't care if it's fair on your leaders whether they can reach the solution. They just want the solution. I think people of ASEAN can be disappointed that on so many counts there hasn't been a solution. You imagine intra-ASEAN trade as well. I was going to bring that up. That's not going anywhere, and you hear that as a rejoinder after the Trump tariffs. People keep talking about intra-ASEAN trade, but no real idea of how you're going to make this happen. And the problem still comes down a lot to supply chains, and you can't just rebuild them overnight. And I think people of ASEAN need to be frank with themselves, ourselves, most of us on this panel. We don't look at each other and have some kind of kinship. Like, hey, you're ASEAN. We don't behave like that. Malaysians don't behave like that. Thais don't behave like that. When Rohingya refugees end up in Malaysia, we don't look at them as people of ASEAN. We look at them as boat people. I'm sorry, that's how Malaysians look at them. So that's a kind of a people to people at a kind of cultural level. There's a problem there as well. And that needs to be fixed if we're going to talk about ASEAN centrality, so on and so forth. It's nice to have these concepts, but at a people to people level, it's just not working out. We don't look at each other as ASEAN nationals.
We're going to take a couple questions, so we're going to start with Dominic. I see actually a line of questions, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to
I'll be quick.
ask for a couple different questions, and then we'll have the panel all respond at once.
So, Dominic Fulder, Nikkei Asia. Just on the ASEAN trade thing, the big handicap in ASEAN has always been the fact that they're commodity-based economies, historically. It's very difficult to trade the same products in a region, just to be fair. Going to this afternoon's topic, we talk about the post-war architecture, we talk about imagination. We were bequeathed things like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which nobody pays the slightest attention to, including the country we're in at the moment. The other thing that was bequeathed, or one of the other things that was bequeathed, was the Security Council. And we're living in a world with absolutely no security at the moment. So we can take it as a given that the Security Council is not functioning. There are no adults in the room overlooking things. Myanmar is completely hopeless because nobody has any sway there, and the United Nations is completely missing in action. It's not there. Its agencies are there. We have a new Pope who talks about peace, and he has great moral standing at this point. So did Francis, his predecessor. These are very unusual figures on the world stage where basically leaders are no longer respected. So if you look at the Security Council as a fundamental flaw in the structure of international relations and diplomacy, you look at the fact that key members are misbehaving appallingly, the Americans, particularly the Russians, who actually threaten to use nuclear weapons, and they sit on the Security Council. The question I'd like to put to the panel is, how can it be reformed? The second question is, do you believe that President Trump, the greatest disruptor we've seen in the past 100 years, arguably, who is no friend of the United Nations, could actually do something useful and get rid of the Security Council or radically alter it the way it functions? Thank you. It's for the whole panel.
Okay. The next question, please. We're going to take several different questions, and then we're going to have the panel respond, and we're going to close because we're already running out of time. So please go ahead. Introduce yourself and please ask your question.
Hello, this is Phung Ao from Vietnam Rise. I work in civil society in Vietnam with grassroots activists. My question is directed to Fuadi. I was very curious about the graph that you had about the discrepancy between the Southeast Asian countries and whether they would choose to ally themselves with China or the US, and noticed that there was quite a difference. And first I'd ask, why do you think there's that difference? And secondly, do you think that difference between pro-China versus pro-US sympathies will kind of make it difficult for these countries to work together? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, Patrick Pongsatorn. I'm the Senior Advocacy Specialist at Fortify Rights and a Research Fellow at Chiang Mai University School of Public Policy. I think as a human rights defender, what I have been most dismayed about Trump first term and now Trump second term is the collapse of international law. And we've seen that in Israel, in Gaza, we've seen that in Myanmar, we've seen that in Ukraine. And I think on a broader level as well, what I've been even more disappointed of is prominent voices within the left kind of parroting some of Trump's lines on the anti-woke agenda and anti-refugee and migrant agenda. And so I'd just like to get some ideas from the panel about what a fight back looks like in terms of standing up for international law in this age of re-securitization and isolationism.
Okay, this will be the last question. Yep.
Thank you. Marissa Small, a member of the club, student member of the club. In the age of Trump, and given what you mentioned about the U.S. dollar, what is the status of the CDC experiments within the ASEAN region, as countries like China and countries within Europe are taking up experimentations? So, so have ASEAN countries. So what is happening there? America is shunning it for a reason, perhaps because it would provide a lot more transparency into auditing governments. So yeah, what is the state of that, basically? And how do you see that helping ASEAN in the future? Thank you.
Sorry, what was the question again?
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah.
Central bank digital currencies.
Digital currency.
Yeah, what is the state of it currently in Southeast Asia, and how can that help ASEAN going forward?
Yeah,
Just now you know that we're over 40. We didn't know what that was.
Sorry, CBDCs, yeah. The US thinks it's primarily a threat because of it creates too much transparency for the financial system, and I think the US kind of wants to keep it the way it is for some reason. That's all.
Okay. So we have 4 very, very different questions. One looking at the issue of the UN Security Council. Another one looking at explaining further the differences of attitudes in the region towards the US versus China. Another one talking about the collapse of international law and what does the fight back look like. And then and a last one focusing on digital currencies and financial transparency. So,
Mr. Moderator, as I have to leave, do you mind if I take the first
yes, you
question?
go ahead.
Yeah, I have to go to the port and pick up Fuadi's coffee, who's arriving any moment now. So.
Did you? What currency did you pay in?
Look, on the UN, I think it's foregone conclusion that the UN is no longer fit for purpose. Yeah. The thing is, even if there was no UN in the current world system, you're going to have to invent one, because there's no alternative to it, right? And I think the UN system as a whole works well. You know, it's not perfect. It has deficiencies. But the one that really needs to be fixed is the UN Security Council, right? That's when it's no longer serving its purpose. Why? Because the P5 members, they are too busy just looking after their own security interests, rather than, you know, the original purpose of the UN Security Council is that the P5 members, they have veto because, you know, and they are tasked to oversee global security and prevent wars, you know, especially world wars. And if we see what happened in Ukraine and the war between Israel and Gaza and so on, Syria, and, you know, a lot of the P5 members just think about their own national interests first before thinking about the interests of the larger interests. And so this is why the logic of that organization is very flawed at the moment, and no one wants to give it up. I mean, yes, Britain and France, for example, they have they're on the P5. They have nuclear weapons, but I'm sorry to say, in today's world system, I don't regard France and Britain to be great powers. Not even Russia, because in Southeast Asia, in the past, you know, Britain and France, for example, they shaped the regional affairs. You know, in Vietnam, in Cambodia, they control Malaysia, Singapore, you know, the colonies and so on, right? So yes, back then, 50 years ago or 60 years ago, they deserved to be called great powers, yeah, because they won the war. But now, in our regional system now in Southeast Asia, Singapore, the smallest countries in the region, one of the smallest countries, are more influential and more powerful, so to speak, to affect regional affairs and regional architecture than France and Britain, right? Even Britain had to knock on the door of ASEAN and asking permission to be a member of dialogue partner, right? Which means what? They're outsiders and they have much less influence in regional affairs, and they're no longer the great powers that they were 60 years ago. In fact, in my book, they are at best pivotal middle powers: Russia, France, and the UK. And I'm sorry if this offends some people, but I'm just trying to be honest here. The second thing about the pushback, I spoke earlier about in the multipolar world, the strongest pole is broken, yeah, and especially the transatlantic alliance is really undergoing serious rift, right? Which means what? Which means we are facing a moment of geopolitical and geoeconomic diversification. Like Europe, Africa, South Asia, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, they are looking for new alignments and realignments. And this is going to take place in the short and medium terms, right? Now, what I mean by pushing back, how is this relevant to the pushing back? We do a program called Middle Power Studies Network at FPCI, the group that I lead. And our prediction is that there is going to be a lot more alignments between the middle powers of the global south, the Indonesia, the Malaysia, we consider Thailand also middle powers, even Philippines also, Turkey, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, and so on, with middle powers of the north, right? This being Germany, Canada, Japan, and so on, right? And many of these countries want a rules-based world order, right? They remain invested in it, and I think there is great scope for middle powers of the south and of the north to find new alignments while keeping their alliances. I don't expect the alliances to be broken down, but you can have new alignments within alliance systems, right? Turkey is one example. Turkey is a member of NATO, right? And they do have some degree of strategic autonomy in their foreign policy, which is why they can mediate between Russia and Ukraine at the lower level, right? And Turkey has its own policies towards Israel, for example, which is different than the foreign policies of Europe in general, and so on, right? So again, pushback factor, watch the movement, policy alignments between the middle powers of the south and middle powers of the north, which is not going to happen in a cohesive, systematic way, but a lot of eclectic ways. Yeah. So again, thank you. I have to leave to pick up Fuadi's coffee at the port, and I wish you all the best, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much for your contributions. We greatly appreciate it. And come visit us in person when you're in Bangkok. Okay, please.
I'm going to take question number 3. So just a preamble on that. I think that being a middle power country is a state of mind. It's not a matter of somebody appointing you or some club that you join. I think that countries are stepping up to be middle power countries by virtue of their own decisions to play a role on the global stage that they didn't play previously. So that's one thing. So the collapse of the international human rights and humanitarian systems is largely at the doorstep of the very powers that conceived of it and presided over it. It's not benefiting them anymore, and they're dismantling it and trampling over it, but that does not mean that there isn't a commitment globally for a shared humanity or some standards that bind us all as human beings. So here's some quick examples of where I see it. I see the reaffirming of international standards with the speaking out by the Special Rapporteur on the occupied territories of Palestine, for instance. I see the International Court of Justice stepping up in ways it's never stepped up before. I see South Africa playing a role in bringing a case to the International Criminal Court of Justice in a way that it never would have done previously. I see the International Criminal Court holding individuals to account in a way that it couldn't have 2 decades ago when it didn't even exist. I see hope when I see an op-ed by Presidents Lula, Sanchez, and Ramaphosa, Brazil, Spain, and South Africa coming together to call and give very specific ideas of how we can address the eroding international economic order. I feel very hopeful when I see the Pope getting engaged in debt forgiveness through Jubilee 2025. I see hope when I see African, Latin American, Asian activists coming together to call for tax justice and resulting in an international agreement that actually calls for greater taxation on the wealthy. I see great courage in Ukrainians that are not bowing down and are continuing to fight. I think you just have to look for it. It is there. It's there. It's not where it used to be, but it's there.
So some quick responses to the last 4 questions. How to reform the Security Council. I say this about very few things, but I think it's impossible to reform the Security Council. It should be disbanded. And some other mechanisms within the United Nations to accomplish the Security Council's avowed original objectives formulated, given not just the poor track record of the Security Council, but also the needs not just for national security, but human security, not just of the nation states, but of the peoples of the countries which are UN member nations. Why the difference between pro-US and pro-China countries in one of the slides shown by Fauci? For the Philippines, probably we're at the bottom of that graph because we are a former US colony, and unfortunately until today, if you scratch the surface of the skin of too many Filipinos, there is still that racism. Again, even if we have a very big Filipino-Chinese community, which my maternal great-grandmother also belonged to. But going beyond the graph to what is to be done or what may be done about it, as I believe as a Filipino, not to be forced as ASEAN member countries to choose between just the US or just China, but to try to build that community of like-minded nations within and beyond ASEAN to achieve, again, human security in our region and beyond, even without, not under the aegis of either of those powers. State of the digital currency. Well, it's in its infancy, just many months or a few years in the Philippines, not yet regulated there, unlike, for example, it's beginning to be in the United States and in some other countries. When the policy position is formulated about digital currency in the Philippines, one of my most important concerns will still be as for how value is captured and symbolized in other forms. Will this be a space where Filipinos who are part of that 99% even in our country be able to earn a living wage, to buy the products and pay for the services that they need for a humane standard of living? Will they be able to have savings? Will they be able to put together capital to invest in their own micro, small, medium, and bigger enterprises? And I left the third question for last because for me it was the most compelling in this round. What does a fight back look like in the age of the collapse of international law? To add to what the many examples of hope already shared by Sister here, I think that since law has been weaponized in authoritarian settings such as in the Philippines in the past several years, I think a fight back really will include organizing education and mobilization efforts by grassroots communities and sectors and different demographics to claim not just electoral and civil rights, but the whole range of human rights, all the way to the economic and the social and the ecological, to say that these national and international laws are important to us. Democracy itself really makes sense to us on a day-to-day basis, and we would fight for it if and when, as often, it is threatened, because it is of practical use to us on a day-to-day basis, and it gives us that concrete hope that we can build and pass on to our children, to the next generation, a better life. I also think the fight back will include young law students, young lawyers, more judges and justices, delivering human rights, rule of law, democracy inside and outside the courts to more Filipinos and to more citizens of the ASEAN.
I'm just going to touch on the two questions that had something to do with Malaysia or ASEAN. So things like UN Security Council, way above my pay grade. Just on, yeah, so in Malaysia, leaning very much pro-China people. And I think two key reasons, and this has been happening over maybe the past 2 years. One is the Palestinian conflict, and of course, Malaysia being a Muslim majority country, and it's a cause that's taken up by nearly every politician in Malaysia. So a lot of the attitudes are being fed back into that. And the other is basically the business links, because Malaysian business people will find that they can access China and gain from Chinese prosperity. But they can't really do the same with the US. There's a sense of American business links. Americans are the overlords. We come in as Intel, AMD, so on and so forth, and you are our vendors, right? And so it's not really operating on a kind of a similar playing field. And if you talk to the business community, they understand the importance of the US supply chain, so on and so forth, but they prefer to deal with the Chinese. So that's kind of why these attitudes are kind of leaning towards that way in Malaysia. And the other thing was about digital currencies. In Malaysia, our central bank is pretty conservative, and it is running pilot programs and experiments and fact-finding, so on and so forth. It will continue to do so for years and years to come. Don't expect it to be the first in Southeast Asia to be adopting stuff like this. As far as I know, no cryptocurrency in Malaysia is recognized as legal tender for now. So they'd rather you just use e-wallets and be happy with that. Thanks.
And last but not least.
Yep. On US-China, I think we're all different because we perceive Chinese threat very differently. I mean, I think the reason why Thai-US alliance was never as strong as Philippine-US alliance is because the threat from China to Thailand is not very clear, right? And I think it will continue to be that way, whether it is problematic. It has proven to be problematic. The Chinese has been pursuing the strategy of divide and conquer for a long time. And it's usually other countries like the US who would like to see ASEAN unite to help balance against China. Without the US taking interest, I think it will be problematic. It will be much more difficult to work together. So it's up on us, up on the leaders to come together and try to help each other out. In international relations, there's a concept called tit for tat. If we don't care, if Thailand doesn't care about South China Sea to help the Philippines will never care about Myanmar. So in order to it's a trade-off. And if you notice, the country that has spoken up the most, one of the most about South China Sea is India, right? Why? So because there's this thing called tit for tat. You help me, I help you. I think this kind of transactional but help each other out. I think we ASEAN leaders will have to take a hard look at this. But it doesn't have to be ASEAN as a whole either. There has already, if you look at the example from East Timor in 1999, countries that went in didn't carry ASEAN flag. It was coalition of the willing, led by Thailand, right? Going in to help stabilize the situation in Indonesia. Something like that is being talked about again with the ceasefire monitoring team in Myanmar. May not good that if it could be ASEAN, but it could also be coalition of the willing, or ASEAN plus India plus Bangladesh helping as well. So there are these ideas. It's just about making sure that it pass certain barrier to come to fruition. I was also informed that Anwar is also thinking about something similar, and then I hope that he entertains some of these progressive idea, and he used to be very progressive, so I hope he stick to it. When he was younger, he's very, very progressive. If you recall, in 1997, he proposed the idea called constructive intervention.
Yes, I remember that.
In Cambodia, right?
Yeah.
And then my late father has to come out and say, tone it down a little bit to flexible engagement, but ASEAN still didn't accept it anyway. But there was that idea in some era about a progressive idea about helping each other out, about looking out for each other. I hope we return to that. The difficult thing for country in Southeast Asia is I think how to manage relation with China. We cannot deny that Chinese was very successful in getting their people out of poverty. we cannot deny their technological advancement. 4 out of the most used app in the world, 4 out of 5 are Chinese app, right? If you see the EV car in the street of Bangkok, and if you have driven one, the best Chinese EV car is not far off from Tesla. How, as Southeast Asian, how do we live with this, right? How do we benefit from this? Don't deny ourselves of these technology advancement, this trade, but also protect our own national interests, our values. And as a subset of that national interest, those of us who believe in democracy and human rights, when your trade partner doesn't care about this, how do we create a smooth and fair relationship? I think this is a big question for all of us. On how to fight back, I think this concept that Badino speak about, I buy that a lot, that the answer may not be US or China, but some form of middle power alliance. And then I hope Anwar will announce something at the Shangri-La dialogue. I heard he's just thinking about it, but we hope we can push him to say something about forming alliance, forming some form of kind of platform to unite. But the concept of middle power is a state of mind. And I have talked to some key thinkers in Southeast Asia, and they don't actually like that term. An alternative term that they proposed back was independent power, because they felt that middle power is a structure, right? You are at the middle, but there are some issues like sustainability, like for Thailand, healthcare, for Thailand, tourism, for Thailand, it's food processing. We can actually lead the world on this issue, right? So the middle power subjected us to a social structure that we can't lead. So there are some proposals to use the term independent powers instead. But all in all, it's about reviving that spirit of non-aligned movement in a less anti-West way, right? A more inclusive non-alignment reinterpret in a different way. I think it is within that spirit that we ought to go back. On cryptocurrency, I was confirmed on 2 sources that there was a dinner table, if you remember, Thaksin, Anwar, George Yeo, and Dr. Faiz, which is the chairman of ISIS Malaysia, advisor to Anwar. At that dinner table, they talk a lot about crypto. But I don't know if it would come to any fruition, but they did. It was the main topic that they actually talk about cryptocurrency from 2 sources. So I think you can trust me. So that I will leave it at that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for a very productive and interesting panel. Our speakers will still be up here, so if you have some specific questions you want to ask them, please try to catch them as they leave the panel. And thank you again for coming to the FCCT. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Again, please join the club. We need more members. We want to be able to bring more innovative and interesting programming like this to you, and the strength of our membership helps us do that. So thank you very much.